Hey there, Jordan with Status Quo. Hope you're having a lovely, lovely day. It is sunny in New York City, and you will feel sunnier in your heart after this not live stream. We are, count it, 9 days away from our live stream ban being lifted, thanks to CNN and their falsely putting us through live stream jail by accusing or filing with YouTube that we violated copyright. Anyway, we've been in that 90-day ban since February, and it should be up, because you never know what YouTube's going to do, at the end of May 25th. So we'll be going live on May 26th, which is a Sunday. Cancel your plans. Today, I'm delighted to have an interview with Senator Mike Gravel. He was senator in Alaska from 1969 to 1981, and he is now running for president at the young age of 89 years old. So we just spoke for almost an hour, and it was a pretty great interview, and I enjoyed speaking with him. There's one moment that's kind of hysterical, but you'll have to watch the whole thing to find it. It's kind of later on in the interview, but something happened that's pretty damn funny. So happy to air that. Remember, we are actively working on growing here at Status Quo. And growing means Status Quo membership. You can become a Status Quo member for as low as $5 a month. You can become a Status Quo member for as low as $10 a month. And your membership, in addition to getting bonus content, you get behind the scenes videos, both on kind of what we're working on at Status Quo, but also behind the scenes content when we're in the field. So go to statusquo.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, and $179 annually. Right now, we are at 408 members. Ooh, we got to change that. 408 paying members. We're trying to get to 450 by the end of this month. Hopefully, after you see my interview with Senator Gravel, you might be inspired to join the media revolution, again, for as low as $5 to $10 a month. And this month, we're making it a little sweeter. So if you become a Status Quo member for as low as $5 a month, this month you're getting a Status Quo sticker, which you can put on your car, your laptop, or your whatever. Put it on your body. Who cares? For an annual membership, $179 annually, you will get that wonderful Status Quo mug for your coffee, your tea, your whatever you want to put in there. So we're trying to sweeten the pot, no pun intended, for Status Quo members. And remember, you have a checklist. I need you to immediately smash the like button. More people that press the like button, which is that thumbs up right under the video, the more people that will see this non-live stream. You can become a Status Quo member. We just spoke about that. Statusquo.com/join. Follow us at Status Quo on the Twitter. I'm at Jordan Chariton. You could listen to our podcast, which is bit.ly/Status Quo podcast, and go to statusquo.com. You'll see the little box. Enter your email so we can grow our email list, which is another important way for us to grow this company. Now, remember, I'm about to air the interview, so you won't see me for a while. Smash the like button. Smash it into smithereens. The more people that press like, the more people that will see the live stream, even though it's not a live stream. And press the share button. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, all of those social media platforms that are also suppressing us. Thank you, Silicon Valley. And this is a super chat. So if you like the content, if you like the interview with Senator Gravel, let us know in the super chat. Any amount is appreciated. That is another way we're going to grow. We are trying to get enough money to cover the 2020 campaign in the field, as well as cover other important stories in the field that corporate media is not covering, and frankly, independent media ain't sending anyone out there anytime soon anyway. So, again, super chat, statusquo.com/join to become a member. Here is my interview with Senator Mike Gravel, who's also running for president.
Okay.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am here with Senator Mike Gravel. You were a senator right in the late 60s all the way to the beginning of the 1980s, where a lot of the change for America happened, I would say, for the worse. And then you ran for president in 2008 and again now in 2020. I wanted to start, I think, a big part of what you talk about so passionately is the military-industrial complex.
So this morning, actually, we saw the embassy protectors in Washington, D.C. arrested, the remaining embassy protectors at the Venezuelan embassy. The Trump administration has obviously been trying to get those people out of the embassy in D.C., and obviously they've been trying to topple President Maduro's administration. So I wanted to ask you, when you see what's going on, now they have evicted the embassy protectors in D.C., and new reports show our crippling sanctions might have even killed 40,000 people in Venezuela. What are your thoughts on the escalation?
I think it's horrible. We should not be sanctioning Venezuela. They haven't attacked us in any way. We disagree with their government, but who the hell are we to turn around and go around the world and telling people that they got to get rid of their government? Yeah, if Chavez was the one that got elected, maybe tyrannically, but then again, that's no different than the phony election that took place in Georgia, where Tracy Abrams was denied the benefits, of having the full constituency vote. They had voter suppression. Obviously, you can see how wrong it was. So with respect to Venezuela, we have no right to sanction them. Sanctions is a form of war, and it does kill people. And we're talking about over 40,000 kids that are going to be denied medicines because of our sanctions. So I think it's basically wrong. Let us stop the sanctions. If anything, trade and help them, because it's a major source of oil for us from Venezuela. So I can't think of anything that's more foolhardy as a foreign policy than our going into other countries like Venezuela and saying, "Oh, we don't like your government. You're a socialist government." Well, here we went to war in Vietnam over communism, quote, and killed about 3 million people, 58,000 American soldiers. And today, Vietnam is the most favored trading company. They're still a communist country, but we can trade with them. So this whole attitude that we've got to oppose socialist countries, if the people want that, that's their business. We have no business getting involved with them. It's American imperialism fighting continuous wars. And this is not the country that I want to be part of and support.
And I find it kind of hypocritical because in one breath, you're starting to see people from the Democratic Party come out and, rightly say, well, hold the phone here on Iran and let's see some intelligence. But on the other end, they're cheerleading for us to topple the democratically elected government in Venezuela. So it seems on Iran, at least there's somewhat caution. But on Venezuela, the Democrats are claiming this guy Guaido, is the president of Venezuela. That would be like Nancy Pelosi declaring
president.
Right.
She's the president. You're quite. It's a good comparison. And here again, there is a great deal of political hypocrisy. Always is that we favor some tyrants and we oppose other tyrants. It's a capricious approach, and for us as a country of supposedly of laws, for us to cook the books on intelligence and invade Iraq is just preposterous. It's a blight on American history, and so we're about ready to do the same thing at the behest of Netanyahu and other crazies to go ahead and invade Iran on cooked up intelligence. When they say there's a threat to American soldiers, then of course they change that a little bit to there's a threat to American interest. What interest do we have in the Persian Gulf? It's their oil in Saudi Arabia. It's their oil in Iraq. What interest do we have? We're producing enough oil, unfortunately, in the United States, which of course is polluting and not addressing the environmental questions which are so oppressive today.
And I'd like to ask you because it's kind of a smokescreen, but you hear the Trump administration and John Bolton talking about humanitarian aid in Venezuela, which is kind of a joke. It's like Dick Cheney going around selling. That would be the equivalent of Dick Cheney, talking love at Woodstock. So I wanted to ask you, if we're so worried about humanitarian aid, well, we are helping Saudi Arabia commit genocide in Yemen. We're turning a blind eye to, unprecedented political assassinations in Colombia. Where is the consistency? Is it humanitarian aid, or is it Venezuela's oil, Colombia's gold, and so on?
It's so confusion and truly so stupid, and hypocrisy. We think we're the police. We're the self-appointed policemen of the world. And we got no right to take that position. We spend more on weapons of mass destruction than anybody else in the world. And who's the threat? Who's going to attack the United States? I don't know who would. I think that you'll get the backdraft of what happened in 9/11 because of what we're doing in their countries. But we're not doing. Most of these people were Saudis. And we're not doing anything negative. In fact, we're selling Saudis as many weapons as they can buy. It's really a very tragic situation where the country that is causing the most risk in the world, it's us. It's the United States of America, which is instilling fear around the world without justification. And I think it impairs our morality. And of course, we have that in the fact that as we exercised our imperialistic policy, we went around torturing people, putting people in jail. Isn't it ironic that today, 3 of the negotiations, the Taliban negotiators in Afghanistan, 3 of them spent 12 years in Guantanamo Bay, and now they're sitting across the table from us on negotiating getting out of Afghanistan. We should get the hell out of Afghanistan, get the hell out of Syria, get the hell out of Iraq. We have no business being in these countries waging war. It makes no sense from an American moral perspective, and the leadership has no right to take our tax dollars and squander that treasure in these countries where nothing is gained. I had a general call me when I was running for president in 2008. He said, "Mike, what's worse than soldiers dying in vain?" And I said, "What is it?" He says, "More soldiers dying in vain." And so Vietnam War they died in vain, both the Southeast Asians and Americans. And they died in vain in Iraq, and they died in vain in Afghanistan. And we're still losing them today in vain. There's no reason for this. This is stupid imperialistic policy by a country that shouldn't even be thinking of this.
And I'd like to ask you, because your generation, happy birthday, by the way, 89 years young, a couple days ago. What's kind of
your generation
inspired you to run
what happened in
the
Vietnam
first time
and
against her, and now a second time
makes me kind of
in 2020? Obviously,
because
we've
frankly,
seen, in
by
my
the
view,
data,
growing
it's
arrogance.
people over 50 that
she
gravitate to candidates like Joe Biden,
people who
and
want
Hillary
Medicare
Clinton.
for all. She kind of belittles the
there are older
Alexandria
progressives,
Ocasio-Cortez wing
but
as
by
that's
numbers,
just a few people.
what
Covering the
sparked
campaign
you
in
to give
2016,
it another go
definitely
to try and beat her in 2020?
A clash of two
Well,
different
to
generations.
start at the
and
last
older
part of the
people
question, what
supported
sparked me to give it a go
Hillary
in
Clinton by
2020
and
is
large.
precisely
Do
to
they
join
forget Vietnam?
that
Because
wing
Iraq wasn't that long
the
ago.
speaker
Why is it that
unfortunately is
people
inclined to
are
deride.
supporting,
In
let's look at Joe
2018
Biden now, not only Iraq, but he's obviously favored a lot of other wars. He's on board with this Venezuela coup. What is it with this? How do we convince your generation, more of them, that enough of the war and the bombing and the droning and all this?
The problem is that the people can't get their hands on it. When you turn around and get upset over what's going on with both Iran and Venezuela, the election's not going to be until 18 months. And by that time, these threats may have subsided, and you've got domestic issues that you're focused on. So that's the shortcoming of our electoral process, where you only vote 2, 4, and 6 years, and when you vote, you give your power away to your representatives, who then have a monopoly on lawmaking. And law is the central core of society, of civilization. It's the law that we live under. And so what we need to do is to find a way to get beyond the monopoly that representatives have in lawmaking. And what I've come up with after 30 years of effort is a manual that'll be published next summer that provides the details of how the people can become lawmakers by amending the Constitution and by enacting a law, the Legislative Procedures Act. Because people making laws, it has to be done in a deliberative fashion. You just can't put something in front of them like Brexit, something very complex and nuanced, and put it in front of them and they vote their gut, almost 50-50. And so now you have the government saying, oh, we can't interrupt the decision of the people. Well, Tom Oliver had it right, the comedian, and that was that what the parliament should do is recognize that the referendum was flawed, was wrong, and dismiss it, and just move on and forget Brexit. But no, these politicians get so steep in their thinking that they can't show any kind of judgment to improve the situation. So we'll see what happens with Brexit. But the approach was totally wrong, and Cameron should be charged with criminality for what he did in kicking the can improperly down the road. So my response to the issues that face us as a nation, I don't see them readily solvable. I'll give you an example. Supposing Bernie Sanders, who's my choice, gets elected and appoints Chelsea Gabbard as his vice president. Lo and behold, they have an agenda. Well, I would guess that there'll be at least, even if the Democrats take over the Senate in 2020, there'll still be more than 40 that will be there. So any of the agenda items that pass the House will be thwarted and sabotaged in the Senate. So if that's the case, and they want to get their agenda, Bernie and Tulsi want to get their agenda enacted, the way to do it is to go ahead and permit the people to have an election to amend the Constitution, giving them the power to have a legislature of the people, and then pass the Legislative Procedures Act so that they exercise their power to make laws in a very deliberative fashion. That's my solution to the situation we have today.
And to play, to push back a little bit, we're living in it's an unprecedented. You have the marriage between the corporate oligarchy, the military-industrial complex. How would the forces of power and greed in this country allow a constitutional amendment like that?
They can't stop it. Here, let's look at the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights says we have a right to go ahead and have a meeting. So what is an election other than the right to assemble? That's what an election is. So if you and I and several other people can raise several $100,000 or millions of dollars, and we decide to hold an election outside of government, got nothing to do with government, we hold an election based upon our constitutional rights, and in that election we present to the people a constitutional amendment and a Legislative Procedures Act, the effect of which will be to create a legislature of the people where individual citizens can come in and propose and enact legislation on the issues and policies they think are important. Now, we can do that. We don't need the government. In fact, the way our country was formed with Article 7, when it said that when 9 conventions in 9 states ratified this Philadelphia Constitution, it became the law of those 9 states. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're following the precedent, and we're saying that when the people enact this constitutional amendment and this law, and that there are more than 50% of the people who voted in the last presidential election, which is the only national elections that we have, so we're using that precedent as a criteria of enactment. And then after that has been done, the people, you and I and others that are conducting this national election, we announce that this is the law of the land, the way it was announced with under Article 7. So the precedent is set there. All of the major framers all said, even though they didn't trust the people and thought it was a mob, but they said that the people had the right to change their government whenever it suited their interest. But we didn't specifically put those procedures into or acknowledge that into the Constitution, except the preamble where it starts out by saying, "We the people do ordain."
Right.
We are the sovereigns, and so we can just do it. And Madison said that very clearly. People can just do it, and so there's no impediment to our doing that. And this is, in my mind, is the solution: is to bring the people in. I can tell you that they'll do it better. Here, it's very simple. We are ruled by a minority. I'm talking about establishing a rule by the majority. And so if you want to continue with the craziness of being ruled by a small minority, go for it. But if you really want to make a change, the way to do it is not just electing people. We need to elect good people, but that's not the answer to the problem. It's more fundamental, and that's what the founders left the people out of the process for a very simple reason. They knew the people wouldn't accept slavery,
right,
perpetuity. That's the reason why the people got screwed out of lawmaking. But we can correct that now. We've got the technology to do it.
I want to ask you, I think there's a crisis of democracy too, and I'm not talking about, the Russian boogeyman and all that ridiculousness. I mean, you're starting to see states all over this country try to criminalize protesting. We're seeing it with the Standing Rock protests that I covered, and other states making it a felony to, quote, interfere with critical infrastructure, i.e. pipelines. You're seeing ballot measures that are passed by the voter overturned by state legislatures. You're seeing, we just saw, I think, 1.4 million felons get their voting rights restored in Florida, and now the legislature in Florida is putting in a poll tax, basically, to stop those. I mean, one after the other, there's real, actual attacks against democracy, not to mention the Trump administration and the police, I call it an occupying force, basically trying to eliminate journalists. If you were president, I know you're running, to get on that debate stage and everything else, but what do you have to say? Because what's worth fighting for if we're not still a democracy?
Well, first off, the recitation of the shortcomings in our country today is overwhelming, as you point out. What I look upon it and say, maybe people are frustrated enough that they'll do something about it and empower themselves. Because what seems to be happening is that we are diminishing democracy in a very big way. So if we see that going on and we care, then the people have got to revolt. And I'm not talking about a violent revolt. I'm talking about an evolution where the people are brought into the process and they'll make all the corrections. So what you're saying is actually happening. And my hope is that it will cause a reaction where the people will finally say that the answer is with the people, not with elected officials, whether they're good officials or bad officials. That we need a fundamental change to obviate the craziness, and that's how I term it, the craziness of what's going on in the oppression of democracy and the oppression of people. Because when they suppress elections, it's because they know that the people that they're suppressing would be voting them out of office. So they have suppression of it's illegal. There's no question. It's undemocratic. And James Madison had a great statement, and that is that the people who fight continuous wars in effect, destroy their democracy. And that's what's going on today. There's no question. When you look at Mitch McConnell, uh, he's the Darth Vader of the Senate. It's appalling. It's appalling. And the whole Republican Party right now lashed up to Trumpism. It's not Republicanism, it's Trumpism that we're facing. Well, fine, we have to face it. But electing people to office is not the answer. We need to have good people. But the answer is law is the central core of governance. We need the people to be able to make laws. You are as qualified as anybody I know in the Congress to vote on public policies.
Well, thank you.
No, it is. You make it a point of being informed, and that's what a democracy is. We hope to have the leaders informed so they will vote right. But then with the extensiveness of secrecy in government, in the military, in the police, it is abominable. There's just too much secrecy, and secrecy is what destroys democracy.
Right. And when you look at 2020, you're hearing it's like deja vu. We're hearing, Joe Biden is more electable, and Joe Biden has a better chance than anyone else in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Well, last time I checked, he voted for the same NAFTA that Hillary Clinton supported as First Lady. He voted for the Iraq War, which she did. He's been for every bad trade deal. He drafted the crime bill. He basically was for everything that they rejected Hillary Clinton for in those states, which I think, frankly, if you look at the electoral map, it's going to be decided based on those states again. You infamously now, I've seen it a few times, were on the debate stage with Joe Biden and kind of pointed out his arrogance. Can you kind of talk about why is it we're seeing this manufacturing of consent for Joe Biden, but as soon as his record is exposed, most of these polls say the majority don't even know his Senate record. As soon as it's shown to those Midwestern states, isn't he kind of the last person we'd want as a Democratic nominee?
No question about it. And he's being sustained by the mainstream media, which is controlled by the military-industrial complex. So Biden is an imperialist. He sees no problem in invading countries without reason. But this will show up. The polling that's going on right now is somewhat irrelevant because there's one, too many people running, and two, you're not getting a dialogue. Because mainstream media and the military-industrial complex support Joe Biden. They support Buttigieg because he's no threat to anybody. And so Biden, quote, appears to be no threat to anybody, the hail fellow well met, and he really is. He's a nice guy. But we don't need a nice guy who's wrong on the issues. We need a person who's tough, like Bernie Sanders, who will be able to take on Trump. Think of the tragedy that Obama, Hillary, and Wasserman Schultz conspired to cheat the process of primaries so that Bernie could not get the primary vote, and it went to Hillary. And yet we saw polls where Bernie was beating Trump, and of course Hillary, because of the corruption that existed the year before she ran, she knows she was going to run for president. Why was she going to Wall Street and just loading up her pockets with $600,000 for a half-hour speech? And this was done numerous times. So the arrogance of thinking she could do that in view of the public and then run for office, and people not realize that she was sold out to the Wall Street leaders. It boggles the mind. But here again, because she was a woman trying to break the glass ceiling, this is the whole campaign they made. Well, what's the difference? If you elect a woman who's really bad from an imperialistic point of view, I don't care if she's a woman or a man. Now, I support Bernie. He could have won last time. Will he win now? I think he's tough enough to beat Trump. The other thing that's happening with Trump is he has diminishing mental processes right now. If you look at him from a year ago to present, he can't read, he's got no attention span, he's manipulated by the people around him, either plus or minus. And so I think that by the time the election rolls around 18 months from now, people will see him in debate and say that this guy's off the wall. And so he'll implode. What would get him reelected is if we had a stupid policy in the United States where the Democratic Party would cheat so that a, quote, a middle of the roader like Biden would get a nomination, and Biden could not beat Trump. Trump, even in his diminished capacity, would be able to make Biden look foolish. And Biden helps. Biden is gaffe prone. So the gaffes will come. So I don't get carried away with the polling right now. The polling satisfies the military, satisfies mainstream media. But once it gets shook out, you'll see some people rise. I'll give you an example. Tulsi Gabbard, who has not been in the forefront, yet if you look at her and her record and her presence, she clearly is a top candidate. But because she wants to rein in the military-industrial complex, then the military-industrial complex, in cahoots with Wall Street, deny her visibility so that people don't get a chance to observe her and see this unusual talent. So, but that's fine. She's tough enough. She'll hang in there, and she won't get windowed out. And so I think that she and Bernie have a lot going on together. If you recalled in the last election, she resigned as one of the officials of the Democratic Party when Wasserman Schultz was cheating, and Hillary was cheating to deny Bernie, a senior moment, and I get him frequently. Deny Bernie the nomination, and this was criminal. And we got Trump. So we can thank Obama, we can thank Hillary, we can thank Wasserman Schultz for giving us Trump.
Well, you also, when you look at it, Tulsi Gabbard has gotten a real media blackout, even more so than Bernie in 2016. And I have to go back to thinking about JFK. You know, he wanted to get out of Vietnam. He wanted to tamp down the Cold War. He wanted to talk to then the Soviet Union. I'm not going to get into all the different theories, but
and then he got assassinated.
Exactly.
Assassinated. That's right.
So, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, she's not president, but it seems to me they're almost as threatened by her than Bernie Sanders, because what's worse, healthcare for all or any shrinkage of the war machine? Your thoughts?
Well, you've got to have the shrinking of the war machine in order to pay for healthcare. And so they dove together. And Bernie readily admits that in the last round, he was not all that strong and knowledgeable about foreign policy. And so he admits that he's been trying to get up to speed on that. But he could just lock into that with Tulsi, because Tulsi's got 6 years experience on foreign relations, 6 years experience on armed services, and has been 2 deployments to Iraq, and is a major in the military reserve, Army Reserve. So she's amply qualified to shore up Bernie's weak side. And Bernie, of course, is right on target with respect to domestic issues. And also he would be opposed to war. So that's both a domestic and a foreign policy issue.
And if you were on the debate stage with, I know there's at this point 75,000 candidates, but if you were on the debate stage with Bernie and Tulsi and Senator Warren, should at some point, if Warren is still in the single digits, Tulsi Gabbard obviously isn't polling that high, in large part due to the media blackout, should they move aside? Because obviously there is a splintering of the vote then away from Bernie.
For my position and views, they should not step aside. They should hang in there to the very end.
Okay.
Period. And because uh, we got a lot of empty shirts running for this position, but empty blouses or empty shirts, and so they should just hang in there, because as I point out, the polling right now is irrelevant. This is the mainstream media trying to get viewers and make it a contest. It's really much too early, and what you'll see is, once you go through a couple primaries, it's going to winnow down a great deal. And even if you had a couple primaries where either Warren or Tulsi does not make a big splash, hang in there. Just hang in there to the very end, because as they get into the very end, their message will be more visible. Because the media will have to cover it at some point. So right now, it's a conspiracy of the military-industrial complex and Wall Street that tries to just puff up the empty shirts. And so just listen to the rhetoric of Beto, or listen to the rhetoric of Buttigieg. What are they saying? Oh, we're going to compromise. We're going to bring people together. We're going to compromise. The Republicans are crazy right now. It's a Trumpian party, and so there's nothing to compromise with them. They just don't want to move forward. And so this idea of compromising before you even get into the fray is stupid. And that's what's being advocated by some of these candidates. Well, we've got to compromise with the Republicans. We've got to work together with the Republicans. Hell, Republicans are just not workable right now. Mitch McConnell has proven that repeatedly with his ridiculous positions on the know-nothings. In fact, we could say the Trumpian Republican Party is really like the old-fashioned know-nothings. That's them right now. So I would not get carried away with what's happening. What is a phenomenon is that there's so many people running for office, but who am I to criticize that? When at my age I'm running for office, and though I'm articulate on the issues and knowledgeable on the issues, but age is a factor. But if I got elected, I could handle 3 or 4 more years. So, and for sure, I would be having Tulsi Gabbard join me, or Bernie join me in that regard. But I'm not uptight about whether I'm going to be president or not. I'm uptight over the fact that today we have such a dysfunctional government that it threatens human survival.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the Trumpian party, but I feel like, when you look at Speaker Pelosi, she's talking about we need to hold the center, hold this imaginary center, when there is no center, and the center is basically right. The center now is like your Bob Dole Republican. So when you have a Democratic Party that's feckless and basically Republican light, a lot of these things that the Republican House, when they were in control, were passing, were with the help of 16 or 17 Democrats voting with them. Wall Street deregulation, bills becoming law for fossil fuel companies. So do you think Bernie Sanders, yes, he's taking on Trump, but would you like to see him a little bit more vocal now against, frankly, the Democratic Party? Because it seems like he straddles the line, but doesn't tend to go any further than that.
No, I don't think he should go further in attacking the Democratic Party. There's enough people like myself that are articulating that, and so he doesn't need to do that, nor does Tulsi need to do that. What they've got to do is get support within the party. My hope, and this will surprise you, but my hope is that Alexandria Cortez, AOC, becomes the next speaker. And she's really that bright, brilliant, in fact. And of course, her concept, along with Markey of Massachusetts, to have a Green New Deal is right on. We need to make a national commitment to this, because what we're doing is, people are for it, but then you get the fossil fuel industry that's not for it, and then they're the ones that have most lobbyists, and so it gets all screwed up. We need a national commitment that this is what we want, and that everything has to bend in that direction. But the problem is not just national. Sure, we're the biggest polluters in 25% of the pollution is ours, and we're only 6% of the global population. But there's a whole bunch of countries coming on through growth that want to enjoy the quality of life that we have. That's going to compound the problem on the environment. But here too, if we could get our heads screwed on right, we could have all kinds of effort towards fighting the environmental problem and still provide jobs and growth if we do it in an intelligent fashion. But we have to do it worldwide in an intelligent fashion, and that's a questionable problem.
And I want to bring up Alaska because when you were senator from Alaska, Alaska is the only state that I know of that actually has kind of a universal basic income program. So I think they give out $1,000 a year, and that comes from money from a pipeline, I believe. So
well, it's a permanent fund. I'm very knowledgeable about this, okay. Obviously. It comes from a permanent fund that was created where some of the wealth thrown off by the pipeline, by the oil, in point of fact. So what they did is a lot of that oil went to existing infrastructure in the state. And then the rest, a lot of it went to this rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it. And so the interest from that, not the corpus, but the interest from that fund then is what's distributed to the people as what we call the permanent fund. And so that gives them each $1,000. Now, Yang's approach, candidate Yang, I believe, approaches that, like the Alaska, he wants to pass out $1,000 to all the people. I disagree with that. I think that Alaska is a unique situation. It's resting on resources, and those resources will eventually be gone, but we'll have the rainy day fund. That's not what the situation we have nationally in the United States. What we have nationally. I just shut that off.
Scared the hell out of me too.
Yeah, it's too loud. Okay, what was the point I was making?
That Alaska, yeah.
The national economics, capitalism is really a very cruel, in point of fact, inefficient process because it's not competitive. The first thing you do is when you get power, you want to either buy out your competitor or push them out of existence. So that's capitalism. And so what we need to do is to develop an economic system using elements of capitalism and then translating that very straightforward to benefit all the people. And here's how you would do this. It's not all that complicated. Is that we recognize that wealthy people get rich on other people's money. They borrow the money, they invest it, and buy production tools. The tools of production then throw off enough money to pay off the loan and enrich the people who were part of this process. We could do that to all Americans. We could turn around and say that if you're a publicly traded company, you cannot expand with loans. You have to expand with equity. That means they got to issue more stock, which dilutes the existing stock to a degree. But then we provide loans to Americans to be able to borrow money to buy the stock, which essentially is buying the productive tools of production. And so now the profits from these productive tools are used to pay off the loan. And after the loan's paid off, the people are enriched. And that's how we could get a lot of money into the hands of the people by the tools of production, not just writing a check and giving. And it's like this old saw, and that is if you want to feed people, you've got to turn around and not just give them fish, but teach them how to fish.
Right.
That's what we're talking about within the dynamics of capitalism and an economy that cares about people. Right now, we provide all of these loans to the wealthy so they can increase their wealth. What we need to do is to provide these loans And I'm talking about loans on the order of the bailout of the banks.
Mm.
If we had bailed out the people, not just giving them money, but providing them to have the tools of production. The statement is very straightforward. The tools of production, profits must pay for the cost of the productive tool. And if the profits won't pay for the productive tool, it doesn't work. And we have that. People go bankrupt because they weren't productive enough with the tools that they acquired. But we could set up a structure for this to do. And I'd have another thing that I would pass for publicly traded companies. That is that the senior management of the company in question could not have a salaried income greater than 50 or 80% times the lowest paid person in that corporation.
Right.
The Japanese have something like that. There's no reason why we shouldn't do it, because right now, with the income that people have at the top of the ladder, it's obscene. It's obscene. I'll give you Rubin, who was Secretary of the Treasury under Clinton, and he was the one that engineered the ending the Glass-Steagall legislation that was passed in the 30s. He ended that. Then he resigned, went to Citi and Citi Corporation, and turned around and made $30 million in the first year where he was on the board. So that's called payoff,
right,
for what you're able to do with the government.
And most of these CEOs that are making, at this point, 250 times their worker are then taking some of that and paying off the politicians. So there's no regulation. So.
Oh, and they pay off the politicians. I got to tell you, they give a few million to the politicians, but they didn't rip off billions by what the politicians do for them.
Right.
It's a dysfunctional situation that is not even close to meeting the definition of democracy.
Right.
And so that's what needs to be changed. And like I say, I've studied this thing for 30 years, and it can only conclude that the answer lies with the people. In other words, the answer lies with majoritarian governance rather than senior moment, rather than a minority, which is what governs us today. So if you're angry with what's going on, it's because we're governed by a minority. And I have a plan to be governed by the majority.
And what would you do, by the way? Part of why I asked about universal basic income is I think Yang has a point as far as, I mean, the corporation's ultimate goal is to replace human workers and just have us all be production robots. Be made by robots and artificial intelligence. What do you do? Because a lot of people are worried that they're going to be out of work in the next few years, replaced by robots.
There's no question about that. Let's look at the day before yesterday. Jimmy Hoffa Jr. was on being interviewed, and he was pumping up Trump proposals, and he never said a word over the fact that it's really accepted that trucks and autos will be driven around automatically, essentially by robot technology. And so, but what happens to all these truckers? They're going to lose their jobs. Period. And that's what they're qualified to do, is to drive a truck. So what the answer is very simple, is you provide a process where you take these truck drivers that are going to be put out of work by a truck that can drive itself. Then you permit the worker to borrow the money to buy the truck and then have it go out and do its deliveries automatically. And then you sit there and you set the math up so that the money that comes in, the profits from the operation of the truck, go to retire the loan, and at the same time throw off some money to the former truck driver. And then once the truck's all paid off, the truck driver who owns the truck now gets all the money going into him. This is a plan that will work, and it really would work very well with the Teamsters. But no, the Teamster leadership is so steeped in the past. You know, all this Teamster guy was talking about manufacturing. Manufacturing is primarily going to be done by robots. So telling me that we're going to go backwards in history and we're going to manufacture the good old way where you have to work 8 hours a day on a repetitious task The sooner we do away with those jobs and give people creative abilities, here we should be paying people to go to school. What is a person who's well off is in his senior period? What they want to go to Gen Train, they want to go to various educational experiences. They just want to enjoy life. Well, we can fund that with capital ownership. But now the way what we do is all of that funding goes to the top 1, 2, 10%, and they own it all. The rest of us are just going to be robots, presently or prospectively, the victims of robots.
And I want to, as we wind up, I want to ask you about Julian Assange. You infamously entered the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. Assange is now, he's facing, I think, some crazy length of time for skipping bail. And obviously,
1 year is what he's getting for that.
And U.S. is trying to extradite him. So the Democratic Party's been silent. Frankly, Bernie Sanders, as far as I could see, has not said anything. This seems to me to be really the military-industrial complex fighting back. They want to put the fear of God into the next Assange. What are your thoughts on what should we do? Because it's not only journalists at risk, but it's the people's right to know in jeopardy.
Well, a friend of mine, Joe Lauria, who heads up Consortium News, they've been doing vigils on the Assange situation, and I've called for it. I think it's ridiculous. Here, Trump gave a Medal of Freedom to Tiger Woods. Well, Tiger Woods is a good golfer, but if you want to give out medals of freedom, you ought to give it to Julian Assange. You ought to give it to Chelsea Manning. You ought to give it to Edward Snowden. Those are the people. Those are the people of courage who have put their life on the line in order to try and save our democracy. And so, as you point out, it's the military-industrial complex that wants to make an example of this people so that you won't have whistleblowers. This is the fault, again, of Obama, who prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other president in history. And when you stop and think about it, whistleblowers are the only thing that maintains any kind of a vestige of a democracy. A democracy is founded on the fact that the people know what their leaders are doing. And so when you have overwhelming security, there's no way the people know what their government's doing. So the people will vote in a very stupid fashion because they're uninformed. What we've got to do is alter that equation so the people become informed. And the heroes in that effort are Snowden, Assange, and Chelsea Manning, in my mind.
Right. And my last question, where are you at? We know that I think you sent out something that you were at 30,000 donors the other day.
I think we're over 35,000 donors at this point. I just get reports when David Oakes or Henry Williams call me and I ask them what's going on. They tell me, and that's it. I'm not, the equation.
You got high schoolers running your campaign. That's correct.
That's one's 17, one's 18.
Wow.
They're running the campaign, and they've given me veto power. But I've given them in return my Twitter account, so they can run the show. If they get me on, I'll go to the debates. If they get me beyond the debates and I can show anything in the polls, I'll stay out with the task right up into the convention.
And do you think that, if things go the way they go, do you think somebody like Bernie Sanders has a legitimate chance to win the nomination, or will they steal it again?
No, they're not going to steal it this time. There's too many people that are wise in that. And Perez, Tom Perez is a Hillary holdover. So we just got to be very mindful of watching him in this regard. But no, they're not going to steal it this time. Once you do it once to me, it's not my fault. You do it twice to me, it is my fault. And Bernie is tough enough to recognize what's happened. Many of us, like myself, will articulate what's going on when we see the illegalities. And I think we can spot them. And plus, the only thing is going to be Joe Biden and Buttigieg and others. The reason why they get attention is because they're not threatening anybody and they're supportive. They're essentially puppets in waiting run by the military-industrial complex. That's who these people are, and there's a lot of them. When you see a candidate that doesn't mention the problem of what's going on in the Defense Department, taking all this money away from infrastructure, away from education, away from healthcare, and they say nothing about it, they don't even understand what's going on, much less being qualified to be president of the United States. And we've been through that drill right now, where we get a person who's totally unqualified to be president, does become president, and we've got some people on the Democratic side that meet that criteria. So, no, I doubt that with enough of us shouting or pointing to the dishonesties involved, that they won't be able to thwart Bernie Sanders. And I think Bernie Sanders is the person who'll get the nomination. And my hope is that he would turn around and select Tulsi Gabbard as his vice president. And boy, what a team that would make.
Well, I hope they are joined by you on that debate stage. I think you are a wise man, and it's been great to speak with you over the last hour. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.